Hello, everybody. It's Lenny Murphy with another edition of our CEO series. Thanks for taking time out of your day to spend it with myself and my guest. Today, I am joined by Chris St Hilaire, founder and CEO of MFour. Welcome, Chris. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Lenny.
It's good to have you, and especially early in the day for you. You're in sunny California, right?
We are, and so but we haven't seen the sun so far this year. We've got clouds all day, but even when it's cloudy, it's like 68, 69. So there's not a lot of people feeling sorry for us.
Yeah, I'm not going to I'm not going to shed any tears for you, my friend. But so anyway, it's great to have you. And for the audience, Chris and I've known each other for a few years. Have definitely watching what you've been doing with MFour. I think you've charted a very unique course, which is a segue to kind of tell us your origin story, you personally and the company, just to kind of level set, and then we'll talk about MFour itself.
Sure. Yeah. It started in, in college, sitting on the couch watching an old show called Crossfire with my buddy who was on a different side of the political aisle than me. And we started getting into an argument, and he said, "You're too stupid to ever work in politics." And I said, I'll show you. So I decided to call the state legislature every morning at 8 a.m. and 12. They wouldn't take my call. And after 2 months, the chief of staff to the one of the party leaders says, "God, you are a pain in the ass, but you deserve an interview. So let's do it on the phone." I said, "Can I fly up?" He said, "Well, I can't promise you anything." So I flew up to Sacramento on sort of a whim, this 21-year-old, 22-year-old kid. And he was laughing during my interview. I didn't think anything was positive was happening when you're laughing. But I got paged at the airport on my way back. And he said, "Get back here." And I was working in the state legislature the following year. And I quickly decided that, you're either good at policy or politics, and I was better at the politics. So I ran campaigns for 15 years, and that moved me to polling, which moved me to communication, which moved me to MFour, and sort of that start of the smartphone, where I thought I saw that Steve Jobs invention and said things are going to change. And so we were one of the first apps in the App Store. Our idea was that you put an app in, everybody's going to want to take surveys on it. The entire market research will move immediately over. and like most business people, if you knew what you knew when you started the business, you wouldn't have started the business. So fast forward to today, we're in good shape, but it's like a lot of business owners, been a journey.
Yeah. Well, I think what's been fascinating is you're one of the companies that you've charted your own course. So I have not seen you engage in the traditional channels of growth, particularly when it comes to having kind of the integrated sample and data collection capability that so many broad competitors have done. It seems like you've had your vision on this is the right way to do things, and this is what we're going to do, period. And kind of slugging it out in the trenches to earn that business. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment. I mean, hindsight is so much easier than looking forward. So when you look backwards, the Buddhists say, when you look forwards, the past's always very crooked, but when you look backwards, it's just a straight line, and you can see what led to everything else and how it's sort of meant to be. I say all the time, I don't get invited to a lot of market research dinner parties, because we've been a contrarian in the industry for a very long time. And we've talked about that battle for data quality and the need for validation and the importance of paying fair incentives to consumers who are now called just panelists. And so that has made our price point more expensive. It's prevented us from participating in the routers at the same level as everyone else. But in the end, I've had big conversations with a lot of the legacy market research firms who say, we'll give you a $5 million contract per year, just lower your prices, your margins are still good. And I said, that's less than we pay the consumer. And that has made us less popular. But in the end, I genuinely believe it's that when you do the right thing, eventually you win. And for us, at least, the right thing has been paying consumers fairly and validating their behavior. And that's given us other opportunities to monetize our app within the App Store.
Yeah. Well, and I think importantly, I remember vividly when this happened, when Apple changed their privacy restrictions a few years ago. And a lot of people got shut down from an app standpoint, but you did not. And I suspect that a piece of that was that you had a fair value proposition and a very transparent opt-in process for your users compared to some of the other folks.
That's absolutely right. We actually spent, 6 hours in Cupertino sitting down with the head of app development. They shut us down too. They pulled us out of the App Store, and our entire model was gone in a day. And so we got the meetings with the right folks and sat down and talked about legitimate use cases for market research. And what was interesting is they were not aware that there was a difference between market research and marketing. And so all of these apps got labeled as marketing apps and pulled from the App Store. When we talked through legitimate use cases for very respected companies who engage in market research, they said, you're right. And so they put us back in the App Store. They also 6-8 months later gave us permission to collect iOS data from consumers with what we call fair trade data. So you've got fair trade diamonds, fair trade coffee. We've got fair trade data. And that for us has been really a key to our success, is the ability to collect behavioral data and combine it with market research data so that you get the behaviors which validate the opinions, and you get opinions which give color to the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Because shoppers aren't single channel. And so, you've got other companies that'll measure, say, location data, or others that'll measure app data. None of them can give you opinions on top of it. But the omni channel is a 24/7 shopper now. So you're in an app, you're on a website, you're in the store, sometimes all at the same time, and you have opinions about that. And the ability to combine all those things is where the industry really needs to be. And we're just going to stay that course and hope somebody listens.
Well, I hear you. I fought that battle off and on in various ways over the years. What I didn't have was the stick-to-itness that it seems like you've had. Is that just pure? Have you turned a character flaw of stubbornness into an asset?
Yeah, you're right. But I mean, necessity is the key to invention. And so for us, I put my house on the line to start the company. And so failure means your kids don't have a place to live, or at least not the same one it did. And so that necessity sort of dictated the fact that we stayed the course. We could have played this router game, and I'm glad we didn't, because I think you have in market research to some extent what happened in the mortgage industry. So if you watch The Big Short, you'll see all these firms became dependent on one another, and these bonds were all supporting the same underlying bad loans. And the bad loans today are AI and chat bots, because no one is going to spend an hour qualifying for a survey that takes a half hour and in the end pays them points that equal 20 cents in actual value. That's just not sustainable. And you could have all the fraud bots you want in the world, but when you start with a fundamentally flawed premise, there's nowhere to go from here, because I would argue that it's virtually all fraud. And someone disagree with me, but we've stayed the course. And I think in the end that better quality data for the right business decision, whether you're in entertainment or CPG, is going to win.
Well, I preach to the choir, my friend. And I think what's interesting though is that so I do think things are shifting because of AI and the awareness that the risk of garbage in, garbage out now is far greater than the benefit from a cost standpoint. When everything's sat in silos, one research study that may have had some variability to begin with from a quality standpoint, that could be absorbed. I'm not defending it, but it could be absorbed. It could be dealt with. So but as we're building models now that could, in many cases, replace primary research, certainly that feed into more sophisticated capabilities from a prediction standpoint, et cetera, et cetera. They go into this large pool of information. The risk of contamination is greater than ever. So, and I think that everyone is recognizing that now. So therefore, I think we've bottomed out on the commoditization component. I think we've bottomed out on the risk tolerance for data quality issues, and it is moving upstream in thinking that we must have higher quality data to drive the higher quality outcomes that we see the potential of now because of the enabling component of AI. Are you hearing that from your clients? Are you detecting that trend now in the ecosystem? I think it's still early, but I do think it's happening. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I sat in one of the largest panel providers' offices, 8 years ago, and the person, their head of data, was saying that their data was wrong and getting more wrong every single day, and that was 8 years ago. And now that person still works within, and I won't mention names, still works within market research at a very high level, and that is disappointing to me because somebody's got to stand up and say that quality is got to be number one. You start with a foundation of quality, everything goes from there. But the minute you start to play that game of cut this and cut that, then you get yourself into a pretty slippery slope pretty darn quickly. So, I appreciate that the industry is recognizing that, and we don't want to just provide state problems. We want to provide solutions. And so, to your point, I think there's more recognition than ever. We can argue about why that recognition is coming, whether there's indictments or whether they're just saying now needs to be quality. I would argue that it's the former more than the latter, but that in the end, we need disruption, and it's happening now. And you've got lots of startups in the space, which I think is healthy. And you have entrants coming from outside market research to play in this space and give the old guard, a reason to look at their business models. The question for me is how do we get out of this commoditization game, and how do you stop participating in routers when an entire infrastructure is built on sort of this mass collection of opinions that everybody plugs into from 1, 2, or 3 sources?
Well, we're not going to solve the infrastructure and systemic issues of the industry during this interview. I share your disdain for routers, while also understanding the benefits from a pure business practicality standpoint. Right, and I think those are the tensions. Right, cheaper path to better. What is the path to that? I'm not going to argue ever that the idea of automation, of programmatic, of routers didn't serve the cheap and fast drivers. Of course they did, which is why they happened. The challenge has been the mitigation against the better, and I think that is what we have to get to now is the understanding that better, and in this definition, I would say better is better quality, foundationally. That is supreme, but we still need to optimize for cost and speed. So is there a world where we've got, either MFour, you become, the unicorn, that just has so many people that you're driving everything, maybe, or is it you and 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 other companies playing in an ecosystem that is still using some variation of programmatic from a scale standpoint, but off of high quality data, right? And we get rid of routers because we're leveraging existing data to target efficiently and effectively. I mean, routers Routers were a reflection of, we don't know who the hell we're talking to. So, right. So you go through all these screening questions. I would argue that companies like you and others say, we don't need to ask those questions anymore. We know who we're talking to, and we have massive amounts of data to target them efficiently. Programmatic is just a way to help bring that into, to scale, to combine, multiple solutions. And maybe that's the world that we're heading to. I don't know.
I think what you're saying, I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense. But if we unpack it, that you're talking cheaper, faster, better is always what people strive toward, right? In business. And they found the cheaper and faster. They didn't find the better. They found the worse. And so, you've got to start with your client, understanding your client is the consumer to some respect.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to respect them. And it's cheaper, faster, better. It's actually not faster for a consumer who spends an hour trying to qualify for a single consumer survey, right? And so if you look at that from the consumer perspective, they've gotten cheaper. I guess I'd agree with that, but they haven't gotten faster or better. Mm-hmm. And what it's lent itself to are a lot of click farms, and with AI, to your point, it's getting even more difficult. The path out is, to your point, and you've been saying this for a long time, is to integrate behavior to validate opinions, and integrate opinions, which are still fundamentally important product decisions, into behaviors to contextualize them. People know, okay, people went for shopping on this day to this store. They don't know why. They don't know how that experience was. And those opinions are fundamental. But geo-validated opinions, say when they leave the store, are fundamentally better because they're at the point of emotion. Mm-hmm. They're closer to the experience. They're validated. And you can combine the demographics, so you can take a half-hour survey and make it 15 minutes. And that's what I believe the future of market research is. That's what we've stayed that course on. And, hopefully people have paid attention. We've grown quite a bit. We could have grown a lot faster. And, I'm glad we haven't, because we haven't played that same router game as everyone else. And I think the industry is coming around. I think that market researchers, when you looked on LinkedIn, they're asking those questions. They want to know where their data is from. And I think once they open the door to geo-validation and visit pattern targeting, which is knowing their app behavior, and then asking about it, you can get so much richer, and you can actually expand this industry.
Sure. Agree wholeheartedly. And I think that we're moving into the vision where the way I kind of break up the marketing life cycle is to engage, understand, activate. Right? I think that's just the big chunks of how that happens. And that's a cycle. We've always had partitions between those things. And I think those partitions are coming down. Part of that is just technology that's allowing us to do that. But in that world, which we are rapidly moving into from a marketer's perspective, it's platforms and approaches like yours and other people. For everybody else listening, MFour is not the only game in town. There's other people doing it as well. Although I think you've been doing it longer. And have stuck to your guns longer than anybody else, and I'm going to give you props for that. For sure. I think we're moving to that a world where that virtuous cycle of leveraging data to optimize the experience of the consumer, who ultimately is the customer, is becoming more and more important. And understanding that it is a real consumer and not a bot is more important as well. Although we're not going to go too far off on this, but if there's also a world where it's bots selling to bots, right? So you or I as a consumer have an agent, and that agent is making decisions that we've empowered it to do, engaging with other agents. I don't know what the hell happens in that world. And
it's happening faster and faster, right?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I'm not I have not adopted a Lenny bot yet, and I don't know that I'm going to, but I certainly could see the benefits of it. And but my kids would probably do it tomorrow if I'd let them, So
and what we see honestly is synthetic data, which to some extent, right, is just an extrapolation. It's just a the combined data and sort of extrapolating if then from say 100 interviews. The issue we've got is those 100 or 200 or 300 interviews need to be real people.
Yes.
Because if you're expanding on fraudulent data, that
Right.
synthetic data, it just makes it, X% worse.
Yes.
And so, I think you need to start with proprietary data, to your point, in this commoditized world that's getting more commoditized with AI. You really need proprietary data and good judgment. You need to ask the right questions of good data.
Yes.
And then there's maybe a role for synthetic, but the bigger firms tend to use synthetic as a way to cut costs even further, because they're experiencing those same price pressures that a lot of us in the industry are. And we just haven't played the game at the cost of growth percentages, but it's going to pay off in the end, because I think more and more people are commenting on the need to understand where their data source is coming from.
So one point that I actually just had thought that I want to make sure we get to your point, we also have to recognize that the science of AI has shown that training AI off of AI data, off synthetic data, creates severe mental illness in the LLMs. Right? It doesn't work. It's like weird stuff. So so the need for fresh, real data actually is fundamental to the development of the LLMs. You cannot do, you can't train LLMs off of existing data. It has to be new stuff. So anyway,
Absolutely.
so you had recently this year announced a deal. I think it was an investment, I believe, from SEMrush, which I thought was really, really interesting. I'm sure that you can't go into significant details, but I suspect it's in the same neighborhood of the ideas that we're talking about on what kind of drove that relationship. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. The investment happened mid last year, so it hasn't quite been a year yet. So you're right; it's been within a year. And they're an SEO company, publicly traded, that sees a big opportunity in market research. And so, they've been the incumbent player for SEO strategies, getting your website better ranked for a very long time. They see that market, as expandable, but market research and insights to accompany those behaviors as part of their future. And so we are their entrant into this space, which is fantastic on a lot of fronts, because I think new energy, new money coming into this space, and a new paradigm with a large player is a good idea. And when you look at their behaviors and adding opinions, it's not far off from what our core value is let's take those behaviors and add opinions to validate one and give context to the other. That's a fantastic thing for the industry. Our goal is to get everyone using geo-validated or some form of validated data as a basis to launch their research. And SEMrush buys off on that value prop. So our sales force went from 10, 12 people to 112 people virtually overnight, and that's a good thing, I think, for the industry at large, especially the smaller players.
Yeah, that's
like us,
cool.
where I'd put us in that camp.
Yeah. So, Chris, I want to be conscious of your time as well as the listeners. We're trying to keep these the CO series relatively short, although there's a lot more to unpack, and we could talk for a lot longer, and I'm sure that we will again in the future. What do you want to cover that we haven't covered? Is there anything you want to make sure that we get to?
I like the focus of the industry on demanding to know where their data source is. And so the future of all of us is, we're fighting individually as companies, but there's a collective fight as well, which is the validity of our professions. And so I would encourage everyone to know your data source, whether it's us or one of the smaller players in sort of the behavioral data or the validated data space. I would encourage everyone to do that. I'd also, encourage them to stay in. I know you've been at the forefront of pushing this topic, so I would encourage them to stay involved here as well. We're going to start pushing harder in within market research and getting more involved and presenting more white papers and speaking to anyone that'll listen. So we appreciate the time today.
Oh, very cool. I appreciate it. Where can people find you, Chris?
MFour.com, nice and easy, MFour.com. I would encourage you just to really look at see it validated one time, try it, because you're going to like the quality of the data. You're going to like the fact that you're getting longer responses and the fielding times quicker, because we're incentivizing consumers to be more involved.
Yeah. Also, this sounds promotional, but I don't mean it that way. But I always liked that you were paying an annuity, a monthly fee, to subset of your panel for usage of some of the data, which I thought was very cool as well. Is that still the case? That it's not transactional.
It is, and our plans are to launch internationally at the end of this year or beginning of next. And that model of treating people, if you treat people well, they come back. It's like any friendship or partnership or marriage. I've got 27 years of just being thankful my wife hasn't left me yet, and that that I think pays dividends because I like her, right? And when you treat each other well, then it's a success for a longer term relationship, and that's how we treat our panel.
Yeah, I hear we just celebrated 30 years of her not killing me, and so I understand exactly what you mean. So
well, there's still time.
Right. I mean, we're young, right? So that's what keeps us on our toes.
That's right. That's right.
All right, Chris, it's great. Thank you. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you to our producers, to our sponsors. We will be back with another edition of the CEO series real soon. Everybody take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lenny.